A last patch of resistance. For many of the Afghan refugees here, their fight to remain in Sweden has endured from the first days they arrived. Now they're using what may be their last to ask the government if they can stay. Their sit-in protest has stretched on for more than 7 weeks. But now the weather is turning cold, many have left, and time is running out.
Even if it kills us, we will still be out here. We would rather be here in the cold and deal with the authorities than to return to Afghanistan and be killed there.
Mahmoud, like many here, came to Sweden alone as a minor. He became separated from his family while making the long, difficult journey.
My brother, my sister, I doesn't know anything about them. Maybe they are died, maybe they are living.
He helped organize the protest because many fear they may be killed if they return.
In Afghanistan, that's Taliban, that's ISIS, that's Afghanistan government. They're criminal, and because of that problem, we cannot be in Afghanistan.
Erki has spoken up about the issue, and for good reason. He was once a refugee too.
I think in the Second World War, when I come here, Sweden was that time very poor. They have to ransom the food and everything here, but still they take care of us. They could take them. Now Sweden is rich country, more rich than ever. Now they say, oh, we can't pay that, so it costs too much. No, this cannot cost too much.
Erki came from Finland when he was very young. He shared his experiences with Afghan refugees in Stockholm.
Sweden needs them in the future. That's the future for the Sweden. They want to send back, and this is very bad. And I know because I'm one of them people build up Sweden. When I told to the refugees in Stockholm, when you're 76 years old, you have to stay here and speak like I do now.
Once known as one of the most generous countries for welcoming refugees, the nation has introduced new policies that make it harder for some asylum seekers to get in and for others to stay. But what has affected the lives of Afghan asylum seekers in Sweden is the designation by the Swedish Migration Board of a number of provinces in Afghanistan to be safe, most notably the capital, Kabul.
There is a problem. In the website of Sweden, the government websites, it has been clearly written that Afghanistan is not safe for a Swedish citizen to move and be there. But they are sending our children. It is a big question mark for a democratic country that how you send the people to the death if you by yourself cannot go there.
Sweden is not the only European country with the policy of forced returns. Nearly 10,000 Afghans have been sent back, now at risk of death or torture, according to Amnesty International. The Swedish government has maintained all applicants for asylum will be treated fairly on a case-by-case basis.
The two parties that make up Sweden's coalition government are divided on the issue. The country's oldest political party, the Social Democrats, have denied calls for an amnesty, while the Green Party has said a political solution should be found so that the Afghan refugees can stay.
But for now, Sweden's policy means that they could face rejection at any time. Huddled around this memorial of the Swedish labor movement, they can only hope that Sweden restores its legacy as a haven for refugees. Randolph Nogel, the Newsmakers in Stockholm.
Well, joining me now from Gothenburg is Tobias Andersson. He's the spokesman for the Swedish Democrats' youth movement. And in Stockholm, we have Joar Forsell. He's the chairman of Sweden's Liberal Youth League. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let me begin with you, Tobias.
Thank you.
In 2014, the Prime Minister, Reinfeldt, had made that famous speech saying, let's open our hearts to refugees seeking shelter. Did you have a problem with that speech?
Of course I did. And I don't think there's any secret that a lot of Swedes had a problem with that speech, because what the regular Swedes saw was a country torn apart by migration. And when Reinfeldt, our prime minister, used to say that we are able to welcome a lot of more peoples, very few actually agreed with him. And we have seen the problems that his speech and his policies caused us.
Okay, and then 3 years later, how do you feel that many more Swedes feel exactly like Tobias? Many more agree with him than they did 3 years ago. Does it suggest that what the Swedish people really wanted is a refugee and migration policy that was far less open?
I'm sad to hear that a lot of Swedes has the same ideas as Tobias, of course. I still believe that we have to open our hearts, and I still believe that all humans have a humanitarian obligation to help other people. And I also still think that a lot of Swedes do believe that an open migration policy is the right thing to do, both for humans and for the economy. We need more people to come here to work, and this is one of the solutions.
Yeah, Tobias, they spur your economy. What's your problem with that?
Well, I think since Joar still wants to open our hearts, that's the reason to why his party is struggling around 4 or 5% while we're at 20-25. But we got a massive low employment rate. We actually got the biggest gap in employment between native-born and immigrants in the entire EU. So to say that we only need more immigration to Sweden in order to solve those problems is an obvious lie.
Mm-hmm. So they went from basically nothing to 20% of support during this time, primarily because of the anti-immigrant rhetoric, and we're seeing the government taking steps to match what they want more than what you want, right? We're seeing, border controls came back in, family reunification got tighter. We're seeing a lot of Afghans get expelled and deported. So, I mean, realistically speaking, is he more in touch with what the Swedish mainstream want rather than you?
No, I don't believe so. You still got to remember that most parties do not agree with him. I think that he's way too extreme in a lot of his views, and most Swedes do not vote for the Sweden Democrats, so they are still in a huge minority. And there is also the thing that a lot of Swedes still want the EU to be open. I agree that a lot of other EU countries has to take more responsibility. I agree that there has to be a lot of more EU countries taking in a lot of refugees. But I do not believe that Sweden or the Swedish population wants to take less responsibility than we do today. I still believe that in order to build wealth in a long term, we need to have more people coming to Sweden. We need to have more people coming to live here, coming to drive up consumption here, coming to work here, and this is one of the ways to do this.
Yeah, Tobias, we're seeing people from Afghanistan, people from North African countries being sent back home because they're not meeting a lot of the standards. There's multiple criteria. So I'm guessing you agree with that. What about the Syrians, for example, when it can be unequivocally proven that somebody has fled war and persecution? Somebody lived in a place like Raqqa, fled war and persecution, and is coming to Sweden to start a new life and wants to contribute to the economy, wants to learn Swedish, and is a refugee fleeing for their lives. Would you at least accept that that person needs to be in Sweden?
We don't want to take in further asylum seekers, but what we do want to do is to go through the UNHCR's refugee resettlement program, which leads us to that we have the fact that these persons are by the UN a refugee. We want to take in those kind of refugees. But what we see right now, and it's funny because Joar speaks so well about the EU, that if we actually follow the Dublin Treaty decided by the EU, which says that you're supposed to apply for asylum in the first EU country you enter, we wouldn't have any asylum seekers at all. Because I don't think anyone believes that you can travel all the way from Syria through Turkey and then through the entire European Union and up to Sweden. And let's be honest, they don't come here for the good weather, they come here for the benefits. And we need to actually say no to that, and instead we need to direct our financial aid to the local area and help them there. That's where we can make the most impact and help as many as possible.
Okay, so it's an argument that I've heard before by many on the right and often the far right in Europe, saying, hey, our benefits, our welfare states need to be for us, for our people, not for outsiders coming in. We can't look after our own. Why are we trying to look after other people? You made an economic argument for refugees coming in earlier on. What about that economic argument? Do you have sympathy with that, Joa?
Well, I do have sympathy with the refugees coming here, and I think that we all, as humans, have a humanitarian obligation, as I said before. And I think that if you look at the welfare, then you need people to work in the welfare as well. And if you look at the Swedish welfare today, you have a lot of the bus drivers are from other countries, a lot of the nurses are from other countries, a lot of the doctors are from other countries. We have a situation where we can't fill the spots in the welfare to make the welfare work. If we want to have a good health and a good education for a lot of people and a good bus service for a lot of people in Sweden, then we need people to come here to work. That's a fact. If you look at the biggest regions in Sweden where they hire a lot of doctors, a huge percentage of them are born in another country. And I do believe that if people come here and we manage to get them educated and manage to get them into jobs, then both the economy and the welfare state will actually benefit, rather than from Tobias' point of view, it will be drained.
So Tobias, why not work harder at integration to the benefit of everybody rather than shutting the door?
We have tried that already. We've seen how both the current and the former government has tried their best to solve the case. None of them admitted that the amount of immigrants arriving in Sweden actually makes a difference when it comes to our capability to integrate them. Because the thing is that you can't have massive immigration and a strong welfare system. And in this case, Johan needs to choose. And if he wants to ruin the Swedish welfare system, that's up to him. Because I want to be able and promise good health care to our citizens. I want to be able to promise our elders a good end to their lives. And I want to be able to promise our kids a fantastic future thanks to our schools. But I can't do that right now. And the main reason is that we've spent way too much money on immigration instead of our welfare.
Joa, you can't have both at the same time, says Tobias. Tell me why you disagree.
I do believe that educating people who come to Sweden from other countries as refugees, for example, is an investment and not only a way to spend money. And I also do believe that politicians on all levels, all political levels in Sweden, put money into different programs, put money into different policies that are not supposed to be in the welfare, that are not supposed to be made by politicians. I do believe that the government spends too much money on a lot of different things. But I do also think that we can save the core, we can save and we can actually develop the main parts of the welfare system and still take a lot of refugees in. It's true that the government needs to cut down on a lot of some things, but that would be true even if we did not have refugees, because the government does far too many things today.
Tobias, why don't you want your country to become a, quote, humanitarian superpower as it wants to be?
Well, because the term has been created by the left, and I don't think that you are a humanitarian superpower if you can't even get, for an example, good health care. You need to stand in line for months for an operation. If you go in on an emergency, you might be standing in line for 10 hours to actually get a treatment. And I don't think you're a humanitarian superpower if that's how you treat your citizens. And I also believe there's something wrong when you believe that you're a humanitarian superpower based on how many you actually allow to come to Sweden and not on how many you actually help. With our policies, we would help a lot more because we would focus our aid to the local areas where there's a lot more effective to help.
Tobias, there are those who fear your organization as the sort of noisy, racist right. Is there any truth to that?
Well, of course, if you have a situation in which a new party is gaining a lot of advantage in the polls, the other parties will do their best to blame them for all kind of things in order to gain and keep their voters. And unfortunately, we have, since we've been going up so fast in the polls, we had some people who shouldn't be in our party searching membership and entering our party, but we're taking care of that. And if you look at our policies, there is nothing that could be considered to be racist.
Okay, are you convinced that they're not racist and xenophobic?
No, I'm not, and I do also disagree with Tobias on the idea that Sverigedemokraterna, the Sweden Democrats, is a new party. It's an established party. They have a lot of percentage in the parliament. Tobias and all his friends in his parties are established politicians. But you have to still remember that when his party leader joined the party, they still used Nazi uniforms in their meetings. And a lot of people that have joined the party during the years have done so coming from different backgrounds, from different kind of racist backgrounds, from different Nazi backgrounds, from different backgrounds that are not, in fact, democratic. So I would not agree with Tobias on this issue. I do believe that there are an established party, but I do believe they still have racists in the party, and they still have Nazi roots for the party. And I do believe that this party is, in that way, a threat to Sweden and to, of course, the democracy. Some of his party members have done remarkable, have said very strange things and have said very undemocratic things and still believe in some racist ideologies. So I do not agree with Tobias on this.
Tobias?
Well, the funny thing when Joar claims all these things, all this nonsense, is that we actually got more immigrants voting for us than the Liberal Party has. And I think that speaks for itself.
It's really fascinating. Yesterday we spoke about Sweden's war games, right? Which is directly pegged to what Russia's been doing in Belarus and the questions of Swedish non-alignment, right? And Sweden not wanting to take sides in different conflicts and maybe Sweden spending more on defense. Are we finding ourselves, you are in the year 2017, with all these various things happening around Sweden, that the country is now facing an identity crisis? It's asking very deep questions about what it means to be Swedish and where it wants to go as a country from here on in. You are?
That might be true. I do believe that Sweden, from my point of view, I do believe that Sweden wants to be an integrated part of the world, and that means taking in refugees. That also means cooperating with other EU countries with taking in refugees. But that also means that you have to choose sides in different international conflicts. From my point of view, we should join the NATO, for example, and I do believe that Sweden has to accept that we're not an isolated island, and that we need to be integrated with the rest of the world on each and every level, economically, when it comes to refugees, when it comes to the military, and so on.
Yeah, really interesting times in Sweden, and it's been a pleasure talking to both sides of the debate on this particular issue. I thank you both for joining us, Joar Forsell and Tobias Andersson. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.